Welcome to Lodestone True North Podcast, episode 005. My name's Mark Whitmore. I am the head coach at Lodestone True North, where we back to bus off business owners, put them right back in the driver's seat. So today I am going to be continuing on the theme of reading from the Culture Code and talking about tips and tricks and epiphanies that Daniel Coyle has generated in the Culture Code. And we're looking into a little bit the third segment of the book, which is around establishing purpose, really driving into your organization. Hey, this is who we are and why we do what we do, where we're going, how we're going to get there type stuff. And there's lots and lots of great tooling out there around how to drive that and teach your folks and get everything kind of laid out correctly. So we're going to be reading from chapter 15 titled How to Lead for Proficiency. When you think of the planet's most challenging environments, you tend to envision places like Death Valley or Antarctica, unforgiving landscapes that relentlessly expose weakness. You don't tend to think of New York restaurant scene. That is, until you consider the survival rates. Each year, around 1,000 new restaurants open in New York City. All are launched with optimism, confidence, and high hopes for success. 5 years later, 800 of them have vanished without a trace for various reasons that are, in essence, the same reason. A successful restaurant, like a successful Antarctic expedition, depends on ceaseless proficiency. Good food is not enough. Good location is not enough. Good service, training, branding, leadership, adaptability, and luck are not enough. Survival depends on putting it all together night after night. If you fail, you disappear. Within this unforgiving ecosystem, Danny Meyer has built a record that is not as unlikely as it is inconceivable. Over the past 30 years, he has opened 25 restaurants. Except for one, they are all successful, and not just a little bit. Union Square Cafe, Meyer's first restaurant, has won the top spot in the Zagat's Best Restaurant rating an unprecedented 9 times. His other restaurants routinely occupy as much as a quarter of the top 20. And his restaurants and chefs have won 26 James Beard Awards. Perhaps more impressively, each of Meyer's restaurants is unique, varying from a tavern to a barbecue joint to an Italian cafe to a fast casual burger chain called Shake Shack, which is now worth $1.5 billion. That's a restaurant. The reason Meyer's restaurants are successful is warm, connective feeling they create, a feeling that can be summed up in one word: home. When you walk into a Meyer restaurant, you feel you are being cared for. This feeling radiates from the surroundings and the food, but most of all from the people who approach each interaction with familial thoughtfulness. When I asked Meyer's guests and employees for examples of moments where this feeling was created, they offered the following 2 stories. A young woman recently moved to New York from the Midwest, took her parents out to dinner at 11 Madison Park to celebrate her new start in the big city, and to allay her parents' fear about the difficulties of living in New York. Toward the end of the dinner, they looked over the dessert menu. The father pointed out a $42 glass of dessert wine called Chateau d'Aquem. I'm not sure if I'm getting that right, not big on French language, and commented on how insanely expensive New York was. The waiter overheard the father's comments and moments later reappeared carrying a bottle of the aforementioned wine and 3 glasses. The waiter said, "We're so grateful you came tonight. I heard you talking about that wine," the French wine that I can't pronounce. "This is one of the rarest and best dessert wines in the entire world, and we would love to offer you each a taste with our compliments." A small explosion of surprise and delight ensued. Then there was a time a dining companion of Nebraska Senator Bob Carey found a beetle in his salad at Gramercy Tavern. The next day, Carey and his friends were eating at another of Meyer's restaurants. After they were seated, a salad arrived garnished with a small piece of paper on which the word Ringo was written. The waiter said, "Danny wanted to make sure that you knew that Gramercy Tavern wasn't the only one of his restaurants willing to serve a garnish of your favorite beetle. If you mention that it's your anniversary or your birthday, the restaurant will remember. If you prefer a table by the window, it will remember. If you prefer the crusty ends of bread, it will remember. These tasks are not simple because they depend on an unbroken chain of awareness and action. The waiter who brought the wine had to be 1, alert to the dynamics between the excited, hopeful young woman and her worried parents. 2, notice the father's comment about the wine. 3, connected to an idea. 4, be empowered to spend the restaurant's money for a gesture. And 5, deliver that gesture with grace. At any point, the chain could have been broken and no one would have noticed. But the chain wasn't broken, and so it created the signature upwelling of warm emotion that has carried Meyer's ventures to success. The question is, how does Meyer accomplish this so reliably in so many restaurants? And that is the question, and we're going to tackle a little bit of that and talk a little bit about some of what Meyer does to pull that off. Another great book to see some of this micro process is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Much older book, kind of the original, well, from my vantage point anyway, the original person to say, hey, you got to work on your business instead of in it, kind of get you outside of being the technician or the manager and move on to the entrepreneur. So anyway, we see these micro processes here. How does he pull this off? So this is from chapter 15 of the Culture Code. And the very first thing we see as you read and dig into it a little bit, and he talks, Daniel Coyle talks quite a bit throughout the book referencing Danny Meyer. And at some point, we'll talk about Danny Meyer's book, which has come out lately, which I have not read yet. But to begin with, Danny Meyer is focused on the client. He's saying, I want the client to come in. I want the client to have this kind of experience. He's putting himself in the client's shoes. He's kind of taking and creating some extreme objectivity and generating a vantage point where he's getting out of his shoes, getting into their shoes, right? And so he says, man, I want the client to feel and experience and see and have these kind of experiences in the restaurant. So that's the first really important step, is to get into your client's shoes. Then the secondly is to say, all right, if we need that client to have these experiences, we're going to have to develop some microprocesses. And really, essentially, it's Danny Meyer's head that we've got to kind of create some microprocesses around, where he says, what he would do naturally, he's got to train his folks to do and get them to kind of learn how to do what he does intuitively. And that is one of the big challenges, right, of a business owner, of an operator. That's one of those first big ceilings you hit, which is, hey, I can do this really, really well, this technical thing, this particular way of making the food or serving the food or talking to the client or bringing the person in and setting them down, whatever that is. But to get somebody else to go, I know how you're going to do it, and so I'm going to do it your way, that's different. So what we got to be able to do is create these micro processes, and you see that in this book. And these micro processes they're just sticky. See if you can see that. Yeah, sticky little sayings around how to do that. And I'm going to read some of these sticky little sayings that Danny Meyer uses. And this isn't rocket science, okay? So these are some of the sayings that they push down through all their employees and lead through. Read the guest. athletic hospitality, writing a great final chapter, turning up the home dial, loving problems, finding the yes, collecting the dots and connecting the dots. So that right there is what we saw with the wine series, the wine little story, right? Is the waiter was collecting dots and connecting dots, right? He was just going, oh, there's an opportunity. I'm putting it all together, make a decision, go for it. Creating raves for guests. One size fits one. Skunking. Making the charitable assumption. Planting like seeds in like gardens. Put us out of business with your generosity. Be aware of your emotional wake. To get a hug, you have to give a hug. The excellence reflex. Are you the agent or the gatekeeper? So those are just a bunch of little sayings that he uses to explain how he's thinking and to get his tribal knowledge out of his head and into an organizationally repeatable process. All right, so microprocesses. Now, in the book, and I don't remember if it was in that chapter or not. I think it might be. There's a gal who's doing I think it was her master's thesis on something that she felt like she could learn from Danny Meyer. So she went to him and said, hey, I'd like to study your folks and your culture. And he said, well, you've got to become an employee and go through our employee process and vetting and so forth and kind of get trained. And it's about a 6-month process, which right there, that's a macro process. All right. And that's a lot of things. A lot of times I see clients struggle with this onboard, finding them, talking to them, vetting them, training them, keeping them, right? It's just like a flywheel, and folks have a hard time with it. Well, Danny Meyer figured out a great rhythm for doing that, okay? And that could be thought of as a macro process as opposed to a micro process. So this gal went through all of that, and as she started, she kind of had this summer camp. She felt like it was just a bunch of, like, there's a lot of just cultish summer camp kind of like tacky sayings. And then as she got into it further, she realized these folks really truly come to believe these statements, and they drive how they behave and how they get things done. So just wanted to kind of show you that a little bit and show you the power of these simple little quirky sayings, and to get you to A, read the book, and B, start to develop some of those quirky little sayings that have your fingerprints all over them, that are valuable in teaching your folks how you think, or how you as an operator, owner, leader think, so that that can get in their head, so they're not confused, and we actually can produce the kind of results we all are in here for, which is for the client. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and go over here to one of the things he figured out, Danny Meyer, that is, and Daniel Coyle does a great job interviewing him and talking to him about some of these things. So they prioritize in this order the players in the stakeholders in their business. So first of all, their top priority are colleagues, each other, right? Second priority is their guests. Now, of course, if you don't have any guests, you don't have any colleagues, right? So you got to get that stuff in order. But their first focus is on their teammates. Their second focus is on the guests that they're serving, in order of priority. Their third focus is on the surrounding community. The fourth is on their suppliers. And lastly is their investors, the ownership folks. So if you can get that, that's a pretty interesting and I would say slightly different view than a lot of common business owners have. So nowhere in there is it saying yourself, like I'm focused on, CYOA, right, or something like that. they rooted that out of their culture for the most part. So there you go. That's just a little deep dive into culture code, the idea of establishing purpose and driving purpose down into your organization in a way that's powerful, effective, predictable. Hopefully you got a little something out of this. I really encourage you to read Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. Until next time, Mark Whitmore, head coach, Lodestone, True North.